What is a seemingly harmless parenting mistake that will majorly screw up a child later in life? I found that when my parents teased me about stuff I was clearly uncomfortable with, it made me tell them less later in life. I have a good relationship with my parents, but I don't tell them a lot about my life because it's easier if they don't know/tease about it. This is good advice for any interpersonal relationship. If you make fun of someone for everything they tell you, they're going to want to tell you less. Simple as. Treat people with respect if you want to really get to know them more. Story 2. I feel like most of these responses fall under seemingly harmful. A seemingly harmless mistake is rewarding your child with something when they do something they already enjoy. Take, for example, reading. If a child just enjoys reading, let the child read without any reward. Once you start rewarding the child for that act, their intrinsic motivation gets replaced. It's called the over-justification effect. Story 3. Don't smother your kids. My mom quit having her own life the moment my brother and I were born. She was an incredibly devoted and loving mother, was very kind to us. But when we were born, she stopped having friends, didn't work, and was home every single day from when I was born to when I moved out in my early 20s. She was very easy to upset because she had no other source of self-esteem, and anytime I screwed up, and I screwed up a lot, it was as if I had levied a personal attack against her. In the last 5 years or so before I left, I don't think we had a single conversation that didn't drive her to tears, and I promise I wasn't that bad. I constantly felt cornered and stressed and fell into depression as a defense mechanism, and she took my resulting lack of performance very personally, creating a very treacherous cycle that was only broken when I enlisted and finally got away. To this day, I often feel like I'm a bad person who failed to live up to her love. Story 4. Well, realistically, it would be helicopter parenting. You always want to look out for your kid. Make sure they're not doing things they're not supposed to. Walk in without knocking. Well, it ruins a relationship with a kid, because even though you have a sense of privacy, the kid doesn't, and will always be paranoid of anyone entering their room without warning. It absolutely ruins a kid. They'll always be thinking, would my mom let me do this? Is she okay with it? Story 5. The saddest part of this question is that my mom had done so many things that everyone is saying is bad. Not hugging, praising, telling me to suck it up, etc. So let me give you one that I feel like would have helped me out growing up. Don't be afraid to admit when you're wrong or when you make mistakes to your child. My parents would go out of their way to justify any mistake they made, and make it seem as if they were right no matter what the situation was. Gave me a pretty messed up view of right and wrong, as well as learning from mistakes, but it was fixed by my grandma. Story 6. Giving in to your kids' wants and desires without upholding discipline and consequences will give your kids a large uphill battle to climb later. I say this because my parents babied me a lot when I was young. I never had to do anything I didn't want to do. For example, when I started getting bad grades because I wasn't doing my homework, my parents would have conferences with my teachers so they could give me extra credit. I had a rude awakening in college when I realized how hard life is. I 100% love and adore my parents. And who's to say if they did discipline me more that I would have turned out any different? Like, probably not, but you never know. But when I have kids, I already know I would do a few things differently. I feel like that's always the case, isn't it? I can't think of anyone who's like, I would raise children exactly like how my parents raised me. No. The personalization in parenting comes from your own parents' perceived mistakes. And sometimes, straight up mistakes. Story 7. Pretty much telling you that whatever activity you enjoy doing is annoying or dumb. I used to love to sing. I was in chorus and would play my favorite songs over and over to learn the words. Not only did my sisters tease me for it, but my parents told me to shut up constantly. So I stopped singing. I must have been terrible, right? I sing when I'm alone or jokingly with some friends. What really broke me was when I went to visit everyone for the holidays and my sister said she was surprised I never pursued singing, since I seemed to love it so much when I was younger. I nearly started crying and had to bite my tongue so I wouldn't scream at her for being one of the reasons I stopped. It's always funny for the ones doing the teasing, but it actually hurts the ones being teased, especially coming from people who are supposed to love you. Story 8. When I was 4, my parents adopted a kitten. Of course, I had never seen anything quite so delightful before, and I could barely keep my hands off the little fur ball. So about 2 or 3 days passed. I get up in the morning and walk out and ask, where's the kitten? My parents told me he died, implying my roughhousing had ended its life. I was terrified to touch an animal for several years after. The fact is, they'd simply given the kitten back to the people they got it from. OP, I don't think this is seemingly harmless. This is borderline psychological abuse. They are lying to you, telling you you did a terrible, terrible thing, and didn't reveal that they actually just gave it back to the people? Cool, great work, parents. What are you doing? Story 9. Treating crying as if it's something only weak people do. My dad in particular used to yell at me for crying, which only made me cry more, which made him yell more, and, well, you get the point. In high school, I tried to bring up the possibility of me having anxiety problems, and I'd spoken to the school counselor about it because my friends made me go since they were worried. He told me I was just a drama queen. I can't even express that I'm stressed or anxious around my dad because others have it worse. Even now, I'm 21 and seeing a psychiatrist in a couple of weeks because I've just felt so bad lately, and I would never let my dad know. I think I'd rather die than my dad know I've been seeing a psychiatrist and discussing the possibility of me having OCD with said psychiatrist, which does explain a lot, and would actually be kind of comforting for me to know, just because he would get so mad at me for being weak. Story 10. Not having them do chores. My parents pushed me to be academic, so doted on me hand and foot as a kid to make more room for study. When you're too young and stupid to know any better, you think it's a blessing. When I moved out to uni, I didn't know how to clean, where to clean, what to clean with, when to clean, how to wash clothes, how to get them dry, etc. The only thing I could do is cook and binge drink. That's no way to bring up a kid. It's a steep learning curve doing all that stuff for the first time in your early 20s. It sounds like a super lame answer, but make sure every kid does their fair share of chores. This is a perfect answer to the prompt. Something that, hey, even I didn't really consider until now. But doing chores when growing up, it does set you up for better things later in life. I do think you can go too far, though, with parents asking you to do way too much for a kid. But not even for learning responsibility, but just straight up learning the things you have to do around a house. Yeah, that's helpful. You don't learn that in school. Story 11. Saying, I don't care who started it. I grew up with friends whose siblings would target the one with the bad temper. They would provoke them into a rage, then cry and play victim when they got slapped. In this case, yeah, it does matter who started it. A parent has to make it clear that violence isn't okay, but neither is provoking someone into said violence. It doesn't matter that said person ever hit or kicked while their sibling did. They never would have gotten hurt in the first place if they didn't encourage the aggression to begin with. Children are clever, and they'll find loopholes in their parents' rules. Parents need to be better and snuff out that kind of BS when it starts. If they don't, they'll raise a manipulator and a scapegoat. One will use them and one will resent them. It's a lose-lose all because of a simple rule. Story 12. This is serious. I carry deep regrets over this. My kids were really wounded by my failing to properly memorialize the deaths of their sisters. We had 2 normal kids. Then my wife was pregnant and gave birth to 2 babies as a very late-term miscarriage. I held them and they were small babies. We thought we did all the right things. We took their cremated remains and, with our children, put one into the sea and another into a friend's lake. We talked about the loss occasionally, but we didn't do a lot of things we could have done. Memorialized their birthdays, Christmas ornaments for them, that sort of tangible stuff that kids can grasp. As it turns out, both of them grieved those losses deeply. They were 4 and 5, and we thought they barely understood it, but we were wrong. And it really wounded them, and they exploded with anger and hurted us a couple of years ago. We handled it well. We got counseling, we apologized, we started correcting course. Right now, neither of them really speak to us. They can't seem to forgive us for that oversight of not properly memorializing their sisters, and it's tearing us apart. We were so close, and now they're so distant and act so incredibly injured over this. And I'm in a profession in an associated area, and so is my wife. We can't even grasp the depths of this loss from a professional, let alone personal perspective. So include your kids in on these sorts of hurts and losses. That's my deepest regret as a parent. Story 13. In my experience, the inability to keep a conversation light and positive. For example, if I received an A on a test and I brought it up at the dinner table, within 5 minutes we would be having a tense discussion about some other class I should be doing better in, or it has turned negatively on one of my siblings. Why the heck would I bother bringing something up if it's going to remind you of something you yell about regularly? In the same vein, the inability to withhold more important discussions for another time. My parents never considered planning a sit-down with me for a serious discussion about something I'm doing wrong or did wrong. They would rather spring it on me when I'm trapped in a car with them or at the dinner table or when I'm least expecting it, or simply when I need to be doing something else. Important discussions were simply interjected into everyday life, and it led me to having bad anxiety and the inability to just relax around my parents. This may actually be part of some larger complex I have about my parents not having healthy divisions between themselves and other individuals. Like, they don't respect or acknowledge that their kids are fully separate people who think in different ways. If I was living in a way that disappointed my parents throughout my adult life, they would die young, and allow it to take decades of their lives because they're so intertwined in other people's business. They would never think that their adult children deserve the respect of like a coffee date or lunch in order to discuss a big issue. It would just be spewed out at the wrong time. They have no emotional intelligence and are the most judgmental people I've ever met. Story 14. This is probably going to be buried in the comments, but is so important to me that I'm going to write it anyway. My parents unconsciously taught me to value external validation over everything else, and it has been the cause of persistent depression in my adult life. Examples that seem innocent: praising good grades and emphasizing academic achievement, being inordinately pleased when people said good things about me to them, encouraging me to apply for awards and scholarships and then being super proud and boastful to others about how amazing I am, tacking up newspaper articles about me, certificates, etc. all over the house, writing Christmas letters that were essentially a laundry list of all my accomplishments, telling me that I could do anything I wanted to or be anything I wanted, that I was exceptional. I think you get the idea. All this taught me is that I am only worth what I can do. It has taught me that I am only as valuable as others deem me to be. Outwardly, I appear poised and accomplished and successful. Inwardly, I have an exceedingly low, virtually non-existent sense of self-worth. I push myself constantly to do more and achieve more and earn more accolades. I burn out and have panic attacks. I feel numb inside. I don't know who I am or what I actually enjoy because I've been groomed only to do what others want of me. I'm almost 40 and basically completely lost. This one I think is a bit tough because in some ways I can absolutely relate. I still have a hard time having good levels of self-worth if I'm not accomplishing things actively at the time. And on one hand, it kind of makes sense, like you want to always be pushing to be better and like do your best on stuff. That's just true. On the other hand, if that is the only aspect of your life that gives your life meaning to you, yeah, that's going to burn you out. It's going to absolutely toast your brain. So it's a careful balance because encouraging your child and praising them is good. It's good stuff. When it is the only good stuff, that's when I think it becomes a problem. I'm not going to pretend to know how to do it better, admittedly. I'm not a parent, but I definitely see the issue here. Story 15. It's always things that are a lot more subtle than you think that can have unexpected and lasting effects. For me, as a child, I was always ahead of my class, and my parents always praised me for my high marks. I never studied to get them. I was able to do it naturally without effort in primary school and a lot of high school. It wasn't until the end of high school and the start of university that I started to see the effects it had on me. I never learned how to study properly. I never learned how to properly put effort into something to get results. This started to affect my grades, and the straight A's I used to get were dropping to C's and D's. I had to teach myself to study properly and get back to B's. It also made me the bad kind of perfectionist. If I couldn't do something perfectly and get praise for it, why even bother trying at all? That's the biggest struggle for me through all my life. Story 16. Physical punishment and getting overly angry with your children. My brother, 4, is having issues with getting fully potty trained, and my dad's response is to spank him every time he doesn't use the bathroom, and he tries to scare him into using the toilet by screaming at him while he's on it. My dad doesn't seem to realize all this is doing is traumatizing my brother, making it even harder for him to use the restroom. Any attempt to broach the topic with my dad is met with anger towards me, and he doesn't seem to take into account that this is literally my area of study, developmental psychology. Story 17. Being overly rigid about table manners over the age of about 12, to the point of physically correcting how your 19-year-old child is holding a fork, timing your children's meals and taking their plates away if they go over time, mocking them for not knowing how to eat unfamiliar foods correctly. What this leads to is, I get an eating disorder, my brother gets an eating disorder, everyone gets an eating disorder. Spending more time dwelling on how evil and wrong premarital banging, dating, and the gays are than you do on, you are my child and I love you. Good way to make sure your son is banging his girlfriend, who fortunately knows more about safe banging than he does because you never bothered to teach him. One of your daughters has a girlfriend, the other is dating someone older than you are, and they all plan to get married sometime in the next 5 years without inviting or informing you. Also using anything they tell you confidentially against them. Want your kids to never trust you or anyone with personal information? Hey, way to go. And lastly, making a really big deal of them displaying behavior you want. Oh, whoa, look everyone, Nina finally came out of her room. Wow, Nina, I bet that was really hard for you. By 16, Nina comes home only to sleep. Story 18. Not letting them fail or deal with their own problems. 1. If the consequences happen because they didn't make the right choices, they need to understand the cause and effect relationship. 2. If the issue is simply out of their control, Let them understand that some things are out of their control. Don't create entitlement when before there was simply acceptance. 3. If nothing else, do it to teach them failure is okay. Failure isn't the end of the world, it's simply a stumbling block, and they're capable of overcoming their circumstances. Obviously, you as parents can help and support them along the way, but I've seen far too many lawnmower parents in my role as an educator, and actively see how it turns a kid towards a life of ignorance, entitlement, and/or perfectionism. Story 19. Downplaying things that are bothering your kids. It's something my parents did out of love and trying to help. If I was upset by something, I'd tell them, I'm having trouble with blank, and they would try to lighten it by saying, oh, there's no reason to struggle with blank. It's all fine and totally easy to handle if you just do X, Y, Z. It was the response to everything. Whether I was sad about fights with friends, or worried about the future, or frustrated about having trouble in school. Was much later diagnosed ADHD, that one though. They just wanted me to feel better and be encouraged. But I've realized later, it gave me the impression that by having negative feelings in the first place, I was somehow at fault for not looking at it the right way. Caused me to bottle things up by just trying to have a positive attitude, and it made me a little crazy for a while, until I learned to accept and not feel guilty for normal negative feelings. I wish instead they could have had the moment of understanding first, and said, it makes sense that you're feeling badly about this, it's a hard situation. Then gone on to offering solutions and encouragement. I'm a big believer of not just parenting, but any interaction, acknowledging how someone feels is very important. And hey, I've screwed it up a lot in my life and made people feel bad, and that sucks. But I do think it is huge when you finally do learn how to acknowledge how someone is feeling without downplaying it. The whole phrase, there's no reason to feel that way, is just bad. The person is not at fault for how they're feeling. What they can control is what they do about it, not often how they feel. Story 20. Trying to teach them a lesson, but actually just cruelly punishing or criticizing them with the veil of doing the child a kindness. My parents call me a female dog as well as other expletives and criticize my every behavior after each outing or social gathering. It's resulted in a deeply ingrained self-hatred complex, and I have no plans to continue contact with them after I'm no longer financially dependent on them. My parents would also yell at me and my siblings in front of company to make sure everyone knew how awful we were. They go from trying to be our best friends 1 minute to spending hours yelling or lecturing us for minute mistakes. When the only two people in your life who are supposed to love you unconditionally are the ones who make you feel the worst about yourself, it destroys the way you believe you deserve to be treated. I was in an emotionally abusive relationship for months because I was used to being treated like that from my parents, and I genuinely thought it was fine. It took direct intervention from my best friends to wake me up and see the truth. Nobody deserves to have their parents verbally abuse them under the pretense of helping them, because it helps nobody, and only damages those receiving it. Story 21. Something that is way too common is acting before understanding why your child did something. Almost every adult has the unconscious misconception that children are evil by nature and need to be sanctioned to get the evilness out of them. So if a child does something bad, a lot of parents automatically and unconsciously assume the child did this on purpose and out of evilness. Then they punish the child because they think that they need to teach that evilness out of them. There are things children need to learn to not do, but in a lot of cases, parents need to understand that children act the way they act because it's their only option. For example, a kid doesn't scream at their parent because it's evil, but because it's their only chance to mark a border that his parents repeatedly crossed. The problem here is the communication within the family, not the child. So you need to understand the real problem and work on your family's communication. Punishing your child is an easy way to deal with it, but not a solution. Story 22. Subtle pressures to follow societal expectations. I've had the fortunate experience to have some of the most amazing parents life could bring, and they never forced me to follow any particular path in life. They made it clear that I am who I am and there's nothing wrong with it. I was never told to be a man or that's a little girly or anything of the sort, and now I have an amazing relationship with them, and I'm very content in my current path to be an aerospace engineer. Also, lack of respect or privacy. Obviously, as a kid, they had to put their foot down many times, but overall, if I had an issue with the way they approached something, they taught me to go to them and discuss the issue civilly. That gave me the tools to handle many situations where I'm interacting with someone in authority, teachers, police officers, etc., and with people in general, girlfriends, friends, family. And the final one, taking mental issues seriously. My parents made it clear that it is okay to not be okay. They made sure if I were ever depressed or anything that I could get help, and they would make sure I was okay. When I was struggling with school in middle school, they were the ones who helped me go to the doctor, who then diagnosed me with ADHD. That helped immensely. Having them support me helped me realize that I could overcome whatever challenge I was dealing with, which led me to being able to get off the medication and function perfectly well without it. This attitude also helped me become more sensitive to other people's issues. My friends have anxiety, ADHD, depression, anger management issues, etc. They all know they can come and talk to me, even if they just want to rant. Remember, kids often emulate their parents. Above all, show unconditional love and support. It won't go unappreciated. I think it's important to note here that what OP's parents did was incredible, and it wasn't just them saying good things. They actively acted on the things, and that's what really makes the difference. I think a lot of parents make the mistake of believing that just telling their kids the right thing will make them do the right thing. But really, example is the best way to lead anyone. Story 23. Trying to excuse or rationalize away things when your child comes to you and tells you in words and or actions that they're now uncomfortable or don't want to be around another adult or child or activity. There is always a reason for that, a damn good one usually. This means listen. Really listen to your kids. Look at their body language and pay attention to it. I know it's easier to ignore it and tell yourself comforting lies that won't rock the boat or give you extra work. So if your kid suddenly doesn't want to be friends with someone they liked before, or they ask not to be around an adult, or want to quit piano practice, just sit them down and really talk to them and find out what's going on. Because kids can't articulate the way adults can. They need to be able to come to you as their parent and be safe to do so, no matter how hard the truth may be. And if they don't get that, if you brush them off with things like, "I'm sure she didn't mean that," or, "Oh, you're just imagining things," or, just ignore them," or worse, then they know they really can't rely on you when something is wrong. Story 24. Reading their diary/journal without permission and making fun of things they say or do. As a kid, I didn't fully understand things. For example, my Nana was attempting to explain intimacy, and I got the impression that sperm would just crawl across the bed and get them pregnant. She thought it was so funny. I heard her telling her friends later over the phone, and I just felt like crap because I was so stupid. And it's been probably 20 years, and I've never forgotten. I've somewhat begun to trust her again, but it'll never be any kind of solid trust. She pried into my life when, had she not made fun of me or told her friends my secrets to begin with, I would have been open and honest with her all this time. I think there's an important distinction here because, OP, respectfully, that's funny as hell. So I understand wanting to laugh about it, but also reassuring the child that you're not laughing at them is pretty important. You can stifle a laugh and laugh about it later when they're not around. And if they ask, or you could even do it preemptively, just be like, no, you're not stupid for thinking that. You have no way of knowing. But, for someone who does know, it's kind of funny. But it is important to really make sure the child knows you are not laughing at them. Because, that can really mess up a child's perception of you and trust. Story 25. I called my mom out on one recently. I'm 35 and a very successful woman, but suffered horrible bullying as a preteen. She had the gall to post an over-the-top, "I'm anti-bullying as a teacher" post. I asked her what she recalled doing for me when I was bullied. Nothing. Because she did nothing. I reminded her of the time she drove me back to school because my bag with house keys were missing. The teacher found them in another student's desk with a note to not return it to me. Neither she nor my mother did a thing. I had books stolen, clothes ruined, petty theft of lunch money. She and they did nothing. The adults knew. I kept getting the horrific advice, "They're just jealous." The kids weren't. They were horrible humans. They were not held accountable for their actions. I've received dozens of repentant emails and Facebook messages over the years. They can all burn in hell. I'm glad they realized what they did was horrible, but they won't get my pity, or me saying, "It's okay," because I grew past it. Despite them, I succeeded. I am kind. Story 26. Gender disappointment and expectations. 1. Don't want a girl and get a girl. Get over it! You're a goddamn adult, and this is an innocent child. Don't call her by a masculine form of her name instead of her actual name. Don't make her keep a boyish haircut and play boy sports if she doesn't want to. Don't punish her for your disappointment. To this day, I am extremely uncomfortable with dressing/acting femininely or using my legal name. I definitely don't feel like I'm a boy, but I sure as hell don't feel comfortable dressing or looking the part of a woman. And I'm almost 30 years old. 2. Swallow your hopes and dreams for your child and keep your mouth shut. What you want for your child versus what they want to do with their lives are two different different things. Don't force your wishes on them. They will rebel and hate you. I was never going to get an MBA and a degree in foreign language, but that doesn't mean I'm not successful and don't have a fulfilling career. Don't guilt or cajole your child into fulfilling your dreams. You had your own life. You made your own choices and you had your own chance. Now let them have theirs. Your children are not an extension of you. They are their own people. You are there to help guide them to their hopes and dreams. My husband and I have always told our son, if you want to be a ditch digger when you grow up, we will be just as proud of you as we would if you were an astronaut. All we ask is that you try to be the best ditch digger there ever was. Do whatever you love, but do it well. Thankfully, he seems to be a math whiz, but the support is always there, no matter what. Story 27. Telling them they need to lose weight or policing their body and food. My parents did this to me, including telling 12-year-old me as I climbed into a spa pool in a swimsuit, "Wow, you've put on weight." No matter what size I am, I always feel like I have to be losing weight. I've never, ever been overweight, except for a brief period as a teen when I was pre-growth spurt. My mom had her own body image issues and used to go on diets all the time, and she never exercised or really took us out to exercise together because it wasn't her thing. I've become an extremely active adult and I love it, and I vow to A, make sure my kids are active, and B, never body shame them. This is a really unfortunately common thing, where a parent has a body image issue and they pass it on to their child. But because they don't know or it was never addressed, they don't realize what they're doing. Because hey, that parent's behavior also probably came from someone telling them they needed to lose weight. Hardcore policing a child's diet all the time, commenting on their body is a great way for a one-way ticket to an eating disorder. And surprise, surprise, no. You're not going to get the result you want either. That child is going to be very unhappy about their relationship with food, and chances are because of their eating disorder, their body isn't going to love it either. So, mission failed. OP's plan here is much better. Encourage your children to be active, that's healthy, and don't shame them for their bodies. Huge fan, OP. Anyway, that is the last story for today. I hope by watching this it was educational. Maybe it'll help you raise your children now or in the future, or maybe just you wanted to know. Maybe you're not planning on having children. Totally cool too. For now though, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I will see you in the next one.